You're listening to EmpowerTech with me, Iyari Cevallos. This series is a collaboration with Women in Technology, spotlighting the remarkable winners of the 2025 WiT Awards. Across these episodes, you'll hear from outstanding leaders and innovators whose work is paving the way for a more inclusive and impactful tech future. Their stories remind us what's possible when talent, purpose, and determination come together. Dr Clarissa Yates, founder and CEO of Ketim Technologies, a Brisbane-based biotechnology company pioneering the world's first blood-based predictive diagnostic test for postpartum depression. As a neuroscientist with a PhD in clinical neuroscience, Clarissa has over a decade of experience in translational medicine. Her journey to founding Ketim is deeply personal. After experiencing postpartum depression herself, she became determined to change the way maternal mental health is diagnosed and treated. As the 2025 Women in Technology Future Focused Business Achiever Award winner, Clarissa's leadership and innovation has also been recognised nationally as the Queensland and national winner of the iAwards for Best Startup Solution, a finalist in the Australian Technologies Competition for Female-Led Startups, and a nominee for the Percy Foundation Queensland Entrepreneur of the Year. She also previously built and sold 2 e-commerce businesses in 2019 and recently closed a $1.2 million pre-seed funding round to accelerate Ketim's groundbreaking work. Before we begin, I want to give a gentle warning. We'll be talking about perinatal mental health, including anxiety and depression during pregnancy and after birth. For some, this can be a sensitive or distressing topic. Please take care of yourself and step away if needed. Support is available through Panda, Perinatal, Anxiety and Depression Australia on 1300 726 306, or you can reach out to your GP. Clarissa, it's great to have you here with us today. Can't wait to get into some of the things that you're on with. It's very exciting.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. This is very exciting. It's my first time recording in a recording studio.
Oh, right. Okay. Very exciting podcast for you then.
Yes.
Look, let's get started. Can you tell us what drives your passion for the work that you do? Let's start there.
Absolutely. So the work that I do is really around mental health, specifically around perinatal mental health. Mental health in general has always been my passion. So I think a lot of it came from my own experience. Back when I lived in Singapore, I remember actually having my first, what I thought at that time, a depression episode when I was about 12. And I remember saying to my mom, I think I need to speak to someone because I feel really weird. And she was like, no, it's fine. You're 12, you don't really know what depression is. And so it's one of those, it's really hard because even today we still see a lot of stigma around cultural stigma around Asian populations. So it's not uncommon. It's not unheard of. But I think the good thing that I've noticed from then till now is that there is a lot more awareness. But there's always going to be stigma attached to mental health. And I knew growing up, having undiagnosed depression, anxiety when I was younger, it did shape my life in a very different way. And I think, I mention it a lot, but, suicidality is a really important issue, not just for veterans and for PTSD. And we kind of associate that with the veterans. But really, when you look at suicidality as a whole, the majority of suicides actually happen in youths. So age between 15 and 29. So that's the largest population, where the suicide rates are the highest. And then we see a really high suicide rate in the much older population as well. So 65, and above. So there's really these two kind of people that are kind of like not really, there's not a lot done for that age group of people. But then when I looked more into mental health in mothers, that was what kind of threw me back even more, because we know from the statistics that youth depression is very high, especially today, when we have social media and we have things that are, it's really hard to raise children and youth in this day and this time. But, with mothers, what I came across is that the statistics show that not only 1 in 5 mothers actually suffer from postnatal depression, and this is a worldwide number, but in Queensland, there are reports showing that up to 20% of deaths in the postnatal period, so from birth up to 1 year postpartum, is actually attributed to suicide.
Oh my goodness, that's quite a large number.
It is a large number. So, and we personally, my husband and I, we're both very passionate about mental health because of our family histories as well. So we like to joke. It's not a funny situation, but we like to joke that we both have like the mental health, jackpot, because he comes from a family that has a history of schizophrenia and personality disorders and depression, PTSD. And my family comes from a background of OCD and autism and depression, anxiety as well. So we almost kind of say together that we'll be very surprised if none of our children get anything. But we both, when we met, when we were dating, we found that was our common passion between the two of us. He was doing a PhD in schizophrenia. And at that time, I was a research assistant. But then I really found that I would love to do a PhD in mental health as well.
Okay.
So that opportunity didn't really come until much later. So I was a bench scientist for a really long time, for about, 10 years. And, then I got offered to do a PhD here in Brisbane. So we're both originally from Perth, me from Singapore. And so when we moved to Brisbane, I started a PhD, and that was specifically looking at depression. So I think that passion of mine of really wanting to understand why is it that mental health is still being stigmatized? Why is it that we don't treat it as a physical health, for example? So, if somebody, always gives this analogy that if somebody goes to a doctor and say, I think I have cancer, a doctor's not going to say to you, well, I think you're just imagining it. I think you're just being
are doctors still saying these things today?
Yes, especially for women. So it's really quite difficult. And if you think about the fact that doctors, and it's not doctors' fault, because really at the end of the day, they only have 10 minutes, 15 minutes with you tops, to try and understand an entire history of somebody, to, help them with their mental health. It takes longer than 10 minutes. And it's really difficult to get GPs. In fact, a GP that I know of said majority of the people they see now is to help them with their mental health. So GPs are overworked, they're overburdened. They're not trained psychiatrists. They're not trained to deal with suicidality. They're not trained to deal with psychosis, for example. So, it's really hard for them. And the most they can do is say, maybe go to ED. But when you go to ED, then it's also, again, a really difficult thing, because we're like, we don't have beds. We don't know where to put you.
And that's if it's quite extreme, right? That would be an extreme situation to be sending them to emergency.
Certainly. So if you say that you are suicidal, then your first point would be to go to the emergency department. And when you go there, sometimes, you end up waiting for hours and hours and hours before you're seen by someone. And then because of not having, this lack of beds in the hospital, they might send you home.
And you've also not got a physical injury, like you're not bleeding all over the floor.
Exactly. So it's invisible, right? So if you come in with a chopped off arm and you have blood spilling out, people will be like, oh, straight away, let's go to the operating room, right? But if you come in and half your brain feels like it's just not, working, nobody can see that and just go, oh, you just wait there and we'll deal with the other people who's got,
more serious.
Yes, more serious. But then these people then go home because they get discharged or whatever, and then they commit suicide. So it's really difficult. And I think the healthcare system to deal with mental health is really quite, it's a difficult one to manage. And I think today we are having a lot more awareness, like I said, a lot, with the increases of AI chatbots and things like that. It is helping, but I think there's still a lot of gray, there's still a lot of things to work through. And my passion really became about how can we help these people? They have a real condition. They shouldn't be marginalized. They shouldn't be stigmatized. They shouldn't be left to their own devices and, to deal with, ChatGPT telling them what to do. So what can we do? And so the whole idea of trying to understand mental health became my goal, became my life goal. And so, that's what I'm really passionate about, trying to understand how can we help these people and how can we combine what we know, from the social factors to the environmental factors to the biological factors, right? So I think there's always
like
been
a holistic approach.
Exactly, a holistic approach. Because like we know from social workers, and there's a lot of research showing that yes, if you come from a lower socioeconomic background, if you're single, if you come from if you come as an immigrant, if English is your second language, if you're young, you will have a higher risk. But a third of the puzzle is really about your biology, and then another second third of the puzzle is really about your environment.
Yes.
So I really wanted to go into my PhD understanding all of this and trying to do, how can we actually use biology to inform what we are looking in the social and the environment.
Okay.
Because we can't look at all of them at once. Certainly I couldn't during my PhD. If not, I would still be doing my PhD.
Solving the world.
I think 4 years was enough. I don't think I need to do any more. But, I think right now with Ketim, for example, I try to integrate as much of this as possible. So we're not just interested in the biology, but we're also speaking to social workers, psychologists, people who can tell us what is the referral system, how do these women get from one point of feeling that they are depressed and, maybe they want to harm themselves or harm their child to actually getting the help they need. What is that journey like for them? That path. And how can they do it? And how can we make that process easier? So if we can screen them, that's great. But then where are they going to go after? And so I'm all about trying to map out that journey right now. And it's not just about informing clinicians that, hey, you've got someone who's high risk of depression. Can we actually refer them to somebody? Can we actually form a pathway that can go from being screened to getting the help they need? And that's really what drives me every day.
Yeah, wow. So you've got quite a personal connection to what you're doing, and obviously that drives you when you hit some barriers because it's a big problem you're trying to tackle. In terms of, why you've decided to go it alone as opposed to join another business or somebody that's already doing something similar, how did you get there?
Yeah, so, I think, like you said, because it's my passion and because it's what drives me, I wanted to be informed of that decision-making process. I think, being in academia or joining another company, a lot of the times you don't get the opportunity to really do what you want to do and make that change. And I think it's critical that if you are really passionate about something, to just go for it. Like, I think it's bold and it's risky, but there is no one doing it. Like there is no one trying to understand how can we help women, mothers, suffering from, depressive episodes, because we know that when you give birth to a child, society, social media tells you should be happy and you should be joyful, and you're like it's this
motherhood.
Yeah, this goddess thing, right? That was not my experience. And I was like, is there something wrong with me? Because I am not enjoying this. Like, I feel really guilty that I feel really annoyed by how much crying like she's doing, my child. I feel really frustrated at my husband when I see him walk out the door, and I'm like, lucky you get to go out and work while I stay at home.
Here.
I got, resentful. I thought that this was not working out for me. Why did I have a child? And I didn't really realize at that time that all these thoughts were not my real feelings. Like, I still love them so much. I'm one of those parents that go like, oh, when is nap time for you? And then as soon as they go to sleep, I'm like, oh, I miss you already. So I knew it was very conflicting, because it wasn't like I didn't want to have children, but at the same time, there were these feelings that were I felt like were not within my control. And so there's a lot of moms that are vulnerable and they feel like they cannot speak up because all their friends are saying how amazing it is and social media says how amazing it is. And there's a lot that fall through the crack. And we know this. I fell through the crack. And really, the only thing that could help mothers at this point in time is a screening questionnaire. It's 10 questions that, your midwife or somebody does, at your 6-week checkup. And again, like when I looked at the statistics in Australia, at least, there's a really low uptake or really low amount of people that are screened. So like, for example, in public hospitals, there's only 70% of women that are even offered a screening test, a screening questionnaire. When you look in the private sector, that's the opposite. So only 30% of women are even offered any kind of mental health screening questionnaire.
Okay. So it's an option. So it's not even a mandatory screening process.
It's not. It's an option. So the current guidelines actually state that it's advised, like it's recommended to your obstetrician or your GPs to perform it, but it's not mandated.
Okay. So then this busyness of the medical profession then comes into play, right? If it's not mandatory, then it's going to be something that's at the bottom of the list.
Exactly. Absolutely. So that's what happens. And it also depends on the mother being able to say, I don't feel right. Something's wrong. Could you, advise me, or could you help? And a lot of moms, look, having a newborn, you're sleep deprived. Your milk's coming in. If you have one of those reflux babies, they're going to be up all night crying.
And you're also working it out, right? You don't know what's normal necessarily and what isn't.
So first-time moms are definitely a high risk for that because they have no idea. If you come from, if you're an immigrant and you don't have your support system around you, no one's going to say this is fine. This is normal. But then at the same time, we might have parents that come from that era where, they didn't get the help as well. Well, I didn't get any help, raising you, so you should just do it,
Oh, boy. Yes, I can relate to that. So, Clarissa, I'm wondering how you saw an avenue for tech in this space.
Yeah, so coming from a background of biotechnology, so my background's biotechnology. I did a biotechnology, molecular biology diploma when I was in Singapore, and then I went on to do a biotechnology degree. And then right after that, I really knew that I wanted to stay in the biotech space. But back then, biotech was still kind of in its infancy. So there was just not a lot being done in the space at that time, especially when you think about medical devices and IVDs. A lot of it was still drug development and all that.
That's where the money is.
That's where the money is. So I didn't want to go into drug development per se. I wanted to have this holistic way of preventing these illnesses coming in the first place, not, treating people with drugs, wherever you can. So I spent my career trying to understand all these technical, skills that I could get to help me to become this very, experienced biotechnologist. I learned a lot of skills that gave me that opportunity to learn what's the most advanced technology when you think about bio and you think about technology. And so when I eventually started doing my PhD, I came with a wealth of experience already. And so I knew that if we were, coming with the fact that, science was always advancing every year. Like, I think biotechnology is one of those fields where in a year you could be redundant, like in terms of your knowledge. So every year you have to kind of refresh your knowledge. Like, there's new techniques and new kind of technology popping up every single year. And so you get left behind very quickly. So I love that. I find that thrilling. And so one of the things that came up as a new technology is a very novel proteomics method, or a method to analyze all the proteins in blood and in fluid and, in your body. And, I give an example, like the golden standard for measuring proteins is a technique known as mass spectrometry. But it's quite a clunky technique. It's expensive, requires very advanced technical skill. And I remember during my PhD when I came across another method that would be able to analyze proteins, but using a very, very highly sensitive, highly analytical, precise method. And I was thinking to myself, wow, this is amazing. Like, this technology didn't exist and now it does. And I would love to do this as part of, in the future. And then technology comes from Sweden. It's a technology known as O-Link, and it wasn't available in Australia at that time. But literally, as soon as I launched Ketim Technologies, the technology came to Australia. So it was like, wow, this is my universal's way of saying, here you go. And that's what we did. So we used the technology to derive these biomarkers that we now have identified, which if we use the traditional golden standard method, there's no way we would have identified any of these proteins, right?
Okay.
And so the technology that we have developed is really looking at mothers with blood samples that have gone through the hospital, but they've also done the depression score at their 6-week checkup. And what we've done is that we've looked at these mothers that had, the depression scores. We've grouped them into ones that are high risk versus low risk, depending on the score they have. And then we went back to their blood samples taken at 6 months. And then we did a very precise proteomic profiling of this blood. So each sample would be profiled against a library of around 5,300 proteins within the body.
Okay.
And when we did that, we found, a signature panel that came up to be highly, significant. We're talking about thousands of times significance in terms of the p-value. And we were like, I was surprised. I actually honestly didn't think I was going to, I would be happy with just one, and then 12 came up. So
Okay. So just to bring this back to basics just a tiny bit, Clarissa. So what you're saying is that you used a technique in terms of looking at the blood.
Yes.
Where you were able to find a pattern.
Yes.
That was specific to the depression that these women were feeling at the time.
Exactly.
That came through on their score that they did.
That's right.
Isn't mandatory at the moment, but the paper questions that they asked.
That's right. And we were able to predict. So like, for example, these women had blood samples taken when they were 6 months pregnant. And then they had taken these paper scores when they were 6 weeks postpartum.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're talking about blood that was taken when they were pregnant.
Yes.
So they haven't even had the survey done.
No.
Because that happens after you have the baby, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, and we found that our markers that we found at the 6-month checkpoint was correlated to that paper score done 6 weeks after birth with a 91% accuracy.
Wow.
So we can predict who is going to get depressed or get a postpartum depression high risk with a 91% accuracy done at 6 months pregnant.
That's amazing. And I can see now how, being able to identify that early, and the earlier conversation we were having about, wanting to then work out, well, once you know that, how do you then help with some type of wraparound support service, right? Because it's one thing being able to identify it, well, what do we do with the information?
Exactly. So I think one of the biggest problems that we see today as well is that it's kind of a double-edged sword. We're living in an era now where data is king, right? We have so much data, especially in technology. What do we do with the data, right? And so at the same time, because there's so much data, people are just like, we are drowning. We're like drowning in terabytes and terabytes of data. We don't know what to do with it. And so the technology of being able to use AI and machine learning in that approach is going to, make it really easy to get these massive amounts of data and put it into just one singular point or one singular focus. And so we've used technology in that way as well, where we get all this data that's coming from the mothers, not just their depression scores, not just their blood samples, but their clinical records, their demographics, whether they've been on previous medications, whether they have any chronic illnesses coming into the pregnancy, whether they had any complications with their pregnancy. We can take all that data now and turn it into just one score. And we call it a risk score or a multi-protein risk score. So we call it the MPRS, and that's what we're coining it. And the MPRS is basically going to be this score that we can then deliver to clinicians and say, based upon all the information for this one mom, it's a personalized score, we can say that she has a score of, 77, let's just say. And that score is above the threshold. So you should keep an eye on this mom.
Okay.
And so they would still be, want to do the depression questionnaire because that's the golden standard. And that's fine. But we're giving it an objective tool now that will complement the screening questionnaire rather than replace it.
Yes. And I'm assuming what this will also do is instead of it sort of being an optional thing and a maybe this might be needed, with a score that is in the higher risk range, the doctor will have the heads up that they actually do need to watch out for these things.
That's right. So we've also intentionally picked a sampling point where it'll be exactly at the same time where the mothers will be coming in anyway to do their second trimester checkup. So they'll be coming in to do their blood tests, to do their gestational diabetes screen and things like that. So back in the day, diabetes screening wasn't really a thing. It wasn't mandatory, right? But now every mom that comes through, it's just offered to them immediately. It's like, we do your gestational screening at this time. It's still optional to the mom whether they want to do it or not, but we recommend you do it because, the effects of not doing it is really detrimental for you and the baby. So I'm hoping that we can change that system and allow that to be implemented in routine care. So a mom might come in and say, we recommend you to do this blood test that will give you an indication of what your risk is. It's still optional to you if you want to do it. But if you do it, it will allow us to give you early intervention. We could either put you in social work earlier, or we can just keep an eye on you to make sure that if you feel anything, strong feelings that come up, that stigma is immediately removed, right? So to the moms, it's like if they feel something when they give birth, they might think back and go, I remember that I can now tell the doctor what I've been feeling because that doctor said I had a risk, right? Rather than the mother going, is this normal? I don't know if this is normal. Should I speak to someone?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Primed.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, wow. I think there's quite a few things that you're doing that are going to reduce the stigma for doctors and mums and change the conversation to a more proactive one. So that's brilliant. So I'm assuming to get to this point, Clarissa, you have had many challenges and barriers.
Yes.
Because it sounds like, first of all, there were some novelties around some of the tech that you were intending to use.
That's right.
What are some of the other challenges and barriers that you faced in this journey to get to where you are now?
So I think one of the major challenges is that in having discovered this technology and wanting to do this work, I found it was really difficult actually to work as someone in academia, for example. So if I stayed in academia and continued, being a researcher, for example, it's actually really difficult to have a company that is, that you wouldn't have the university fighting you in the IP.
Okay.
So it is a real issue because in Australia, in the US, you have, at Boston and at different places, they kind of take a cut of your company, but it's quite low. So it's manageable. So you can, the university provides you the infrastructure, provides you everything that you need to have incubate your company, and then you go off and then the university takes a cut.
Yeah.
But universities here, the terms that they provide is usually not great. And usually it's also 100% ownership of the IP. So there's just no way to really commercialize if you don't have your IP. So if I had discovered or did this technology under university, for example, I would own nothing. And so it would not, like if I'm raising with investors and I found this, the first question is, where's your IP? Is your IP with you? Is your IP with the university?
Yeah.
And as soon as they hear it's with the university, it turns them off immediately because they know it's really difficult to get your IP back.
Yeah, and what you own becomes a different proposition.
Exactly.
And I'm assuming that this setup here in Australia has been here for forever and isn't really up for negotiation.
No. So there are certain universities that try to do a good job of it. But generally speaking, like compared to the US, for example, Australia's just really risk averse in that sense. So unless they see that you've already de-risked like your product all the way till, it's ready to go to launch now and you can earn your 10 times returns or whatever, they don't tend to want to even speak to you. So it's kind of difficult. And so you're left with, all right, I have to leave the university then. I have to do this on my own. And then there comes the financial kind of...
Yes, because you don't have the infrastructure.
Don't have the infrastructure. You don't have a salary anymore. You
don't have a lab at home.
No, you don't have a lab at home. I honestly, I genuinely was thinking of setting up a lab in my garage at one point in time. And I know people who've done that. Yes. And it's really hard. And I think the lack of incubator spaces here as well. Like we have the precinct, for example, where you can rent offices and stuff like that. But there isn't anywhere where you can rent lab space, for example, right? So you have you have co-lab spaces in Melbourne, in Sydney, but you just don't have any in Brisbane.
Okay.
And so it's also a challenge to be, geographically where you are. Like if I were still in Singapore, for example, I would have no issue. Like I actually went back recently, visited some co-lab space and I was like, this is a dream.
That must have been so hard.
It's really hard. And you end up just trying your best to, because how can you get your pilot data, I suppose, without the money, without the infrastructure?
Okay.
So I've got my IP, that's great. But then also you need money to pay for your IP, right? So the initial, I guess, amount of money, that capital that you need is really critical. And I'm fortunate that I was in a position where my husband and I had a house and we sold the house and we put the entire profits of our house into the company.
Wow. That would have been an interesting conversation to have around the dinner table.
Honestly, he was the one that pushed me into it. He was like, I think we should do it. Like if there's any one time in life now for us to do this, we should do this now.
To take the risk.
Take the risk. And, if we fail at doing something great, at least we feel it.
We gave it a good shot. Yes. Well, good on you. And good on him for backing you.
Oh, yes.
And once you made that decision, did you have, I guess, a bit of a 6 months or a year or whatever the timeline was where you were just kind of running at speed until you got to the next kind of big hurdle?
Yes, definitely. So I think because we were fortunate enough to have that initial capital, I was able to get the pilot study done. Partnerships, like when you're low on funds and you don't have a lot, then it's really important to build those relationships and those partnerships really early. I think that's the good thing that Australia has. So Australia has a very collegiate kind of spirit where, we want to try and help everyone as much as we can. And I found that to be pretty common. So it's not an unusual experience to go to a professor and say, I really want to do this. Do you want to be involved? And the answers most of the time is yes. Whereas in the US, it's really like cutthroat. So it's like, this is my tech, I don't want you near my tech sort of thing. So I was very fortunate in the early days to have very good relationships with academic labs and professors and things like that. And so the Mother Hospital and Queensland Family Cohort in particular, they were the ones that gave me that first kind of go and say, hey, we've got these samples, we've got these moms that had given up their blood, we have the scores that you need. If you want to go through your ethics approval, we're more than happy to work with you here.
And wow, that's really, that would have been really handy, right? Because for this sort of thing to work, you need data.
That's right. And so it's, and I had to make sure that, because I'm doing this for the sake of wanting to change medical practice, I'm not doing it for the sole benefit of, commercializing and just getting all the money that comes from it. That's not my motivation. That's never been my motivation. So I think in terms of the legal agreements, when I had to then go through all of that, it was more about like, if you're happy for me to use this data to get to this point of getting these tests out and applying for the patents because I need them for my commercialization, I'm more than happy for the data to go back to the university, to the hospital, whatever, for your own research and training purposes.
Yes.
And so it's really important to have that relationship with them, right? Because as a commercial company, I think there's always going to be that fear, like, if you're a commercial company, you're just going to take everything, make a whole lot of money, and then we'll get left behind. But for me, it's always about giving back. How can I give back? How can I give back to the community? How can I give back to the people that's helped me? How can I give back for further research and training? Because if we, research is going to fuel commercialization. So we need the research, right? So if I just take everything for myself and there isn't anything that's going to push the needle forward, then again, it defeats my purpose. So I think having those kind of discussions and conversations early on was really helpful.
So your mindset around that is pretty clear in terms of how you approached that. Did you already have existing relationships in this space and you kind of just grew that network of people that you were starting to speak to?
No, I started from ground zero. So I literally...
So how hard was the first couple of phone calls?
So, the very first person I reached out to was actually a cold call email. And I was like, hey, this Professor Vicky, I was saying, hey, Vicky, I can see that you do a lot of work in placental development and stress in mothers. Could you meet for a coffee? And you'd be surprised how many of people would just say, yeah, sure. And so the number of, in the early days when I was running Ketim, I was jokingly saying to someone the other day, I wish I had like a universal coffee discount card because the amount of cafes I went to in the beginning was insane. And the amount of coffees I had in the beginning was insane. I was like literally fueled by adrenaline and coffee. And it's just from there. And then from there, like they recommend you or introduce you to someone else and then to someone else and to someone else. And honestly speaking, I say this to a lot of people and I'm not, not promoting in any way, shape or form, but LinkedIn was really, really critical for my growth. So being able to use the platform to connect with people there, look up people who are in the space that you're in, reach out to them, message them and say, hey, I really think that you're a great person that I could talk to. Could I pick your brain? Could I have a coffee with you? I've not had a single person say no.
Yes, most people want to have a conversation about the stuff that they're interested in.
Exactly. And then you find commonalities, right? You find people who share your vision, who share your passion, who share your interest. And then sooner or later, they become your co-founder or they become your director or they become your advisor. And that's how I met my co-founder who comes on with me. So he didn't come from the beginning, but I met him through my networks. And I found that his ability to understand what I'm doing and the fact that he's also had a psychiatry kind of background and he does AI and he does machine learning. I was like, great, you're the second piece of the puzzle that I've been looking for.
Yes.
And like, like actually joke with him today that it's our founderversary because it's 1 year ago on this date we met for the first time.
Wow, congratulations.
So I coined founderversary as well. There you go. So I called
him. You heard it here first.
Yes, I called him today. I said, happy founderversary. But it's really critical to build those relationships early on. Really
and critical. I have heard that story before where, if if you're getting to know people and you're building that network, you're not really interviewing for a co-founder, but you find people that you get on with and you find those skills that you might not have but would be a good
fit,
co-founder for a fit.
Yes.
And that's when you kind of then start that conversation when you've you've already spoken to them for a little while.
And I always say to people, when you speak to someone, don't go into the meeting or into whatever, like wanting to ask something from that person. Just go in because you want to know the person, right? And a lot of times I meet people and go, it was really nice catching up with you, and but I don't think we have a future together in that sense. It's kind of like speed dating, right? So, and I say to people all the time, it's pretty much like speed dating. You meet a whole bunch of people and you go like, yeah, I enjoyed that chat, but maybe we'll stay friends, sort of thing. And then other times I'm like, I really enjoyed that. Maybe we should have a second meetup, and it's like a second date, again. And so on and so forth. And I always compare, having a co-founder relationship is really very much like having a proper kind of relationship, because it's all about trust. It's all about being able to communicate, be honest, and, vulnerable with that person, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with that person, and you're going to have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yes.
So I always say to people, like, don't just pick someone purely for their name or purely for like their skill set or whatever. Make sure you also like this person as a person.
Yeah, their personality.
Yeah, because if not, the company's just going to go down, like, egos
when
can come
things
in
get
and
tough. Yes, that's
exactly.
when it all falls apart, for sure. Great advice.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this conversation in a different direction now, Clarissa. I want to really, I guess, think back for you in terms of where you've come from and the journey that you've been on. If there was a young girl or a young boy thinking about making a difference like you are, and you're going to, this is a journey that you're still on, what advice would you share with those aspiring to follow a path like yours?
I would say, first of all, be open-minded. So, I think if you have an idea or a passion or a dream, just hold on to it. And, the right time will come. But at the same time, don't wait too long. So, it's like I, waited, I waited about, let's just see, maybe about 5. Like if I wanted to count exactly from when I really wanted to do, focus on mental health to today, it's like 7 years in the making, right? And I have like over 13 years experience as a lab bench scientist first before I even launched Ketim. So I'm not saying to wait that long, but, I think if you have an idea and you have something that you want to build on, start making those networks, because you never know who's going to lead you somewhere. So, you could start networking. That's free. That's easy. You don't need capital for that. You don't need a lot of time for that. Even if you're just a student studying, even if you're in a job that you kind of like but you want to leave, or even if you hate your job or whatever, just be patient and have some money in your backup, as a backup, because it did take me about I haven't paid myself in like 18 months. So, it's really important to have that financial stability as well. And you need to also have that support system. So I always say to people that if you don't feel like you have that support system to help you, things like, women in technology as well, and things like organizations that support you, even if you don't have the actual support from your friends or family or whatever, I think it's really critical to just start building that support system, because you never know who's going to recommend you to somebody who says, I know this person who's doing this exact thing that you told me about. I think you should meet this person up. And then that person will go, oh, you should meet this person and you should meet that person. And it's never too early to do that.
Yes.
And then once you've done that, it's then coming up with that execution, right? Coming up with that plan. Okay, I've met the right people now. I know what I want to do. How do I get there? And then that's where you speak to the professionals. That's when you speak to lawyers and accountants. And if you have friends that are in that space that are willing to just give you have a chat with you over coffee.
Yeah, to give you that initial advice.
Yeah, because you don't have to go out immediately and start paying thousands of dollars to a lawyer or thousands of dollars to an accountant. Like try to understand whether the thing that you're interested in has some leg to stand on, right?
Yes.
So, do your market research really early. Go speak to consumers. Go speak to people, the end users of whatever your product's going to be. Ask them. Like I always tell people that when I launched Ketim, it was when my youngest daughter was in the NICU because she was born at 29 weeks. And I was surrounded by midwives and like nurses and all that. And while I was holding her on my chest for like 8 hours a day, I'll be like, hey, what do you think of a blood test that could predict? And they were like, you mean that such a thing exists? I said, no, it doesn't exist. I want to do that. And they're like, yeah, you should do that. And this is the things that we find is really hard. And so I was doing market research while holding my baby on my chest.
It happens anytime, anywhere.
And it's free. Like I said, it's like people in Australia seem to be really open to helping and having those conversations. And then it's all about mentorship as well. Find someone who you think can mentor you both personally and professionally.
Yes.
So if you have someone who understands what you're going through personally, but can also give you those professional advice, I think that's going to be critical from day one. So like my director on my company, Carrie Hilliard, she's also she's also my mentor. So from day one, she's helped me as a woman trying to work in a tech world, trying to work in a biotech world. She had her own experiences as a woman in the early days where she would be the only female in a room full of male doctors, for example. And so she could help me from a woman's point of view. How do you get over those, I guess, imposter syndromes, those feelings where, I'm just a woman, what can I do? And then professionally, this is what you need to do professionally to get your company from here to here. So having those early mentorships that you can find is critical.
I can see how that would be invaluable to give you kind of different perspectives and ability for you to think about things differently.
Absolutely.
And just to go back to some of the things that you've just said, so there's an element of making sure that if you want to start a business like this, that you've got some level of financial kind of support around you, because there are going to be times where you don't get paid. And you've just mentioned an 18-month kind of period there. It could be 18 months, it could be 2 years, could be 3 years, right? So you do need some kind of financial support to keep you buoyant as you go through that.
Yeah.
And then there's the kind of network that you mentioned that you can start that at any time.
Yeah.
And obviously it will evolve over time, and relationships take time to kind of foster and maintain. Exactly. So that makes a lot of sense to start early.
Exactly.
And you also mentioned, although you might be the face of the business, you've really got a team behind you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It takes a team to achieve the kind of things that you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
Personal team, so your partner at home, as well as that professional kind of element as well.
That's right. So, with companies that can put products into market a lot quicker. Like for me, biotechnology is always going to be one of those things that for the first 2-3 years of the business, you're operating at a loss, right? You're not going to get revenue. But if you're in other kind of businesses where you can deliver a product, you can bootstrap, you can try, and if you can do coding, if you can create your own app, you can create your own software, then it really becomes about how quickly can you bootstrap to get your product to market. Even if you get just very early users, right? People who can give you that feedback, even if they're only paying $2 for your app, for example. Anything that can just give you that early traction, that early revenue is going to be critical. So when you go on to raise, if they can see that you've got early revenue, it doesn't have to be a lot. A lot of people think you have to be earning $1 million in ARR before you go raise. But it's not true. It's I think if you have the passion and a lot of the early raises you do, your investors are looking at you as a founder. So I think a lot of people focus on the product where they feel like, if I don't get this product in market, then I don't have any money. But really it's also about you, right? So
because you're going to see the business through.
Yeah, you are the face of the business, like you said. And so if you have, you may be very good technically, like you could, do an app and a software, but you're not a face, you're not someone who wants to face investors. Like that's something that I feel that people have to work on, because a lot of investors, they trust the person who's running the business. And so if you're running a business and you don't want to be the one, you send someone else in your place, it doesn't look good. So, I think people have to be comfortable with that. And I think I've met a lot of founders now who are technically excellent. Like they could build stuff that is just crazy. But they'll be like, but I don't want to go to meetings. I don't want to go to networking. I don't want to meet the investors.
I don't like the people side of things.
Yes. And I'm like, then you better go find somebody who can do that.
Yes.
So, if you cannot find somebody who can do that, then
your idea is not going to get off the ground.
Then it's just a hobby. And I always say to people, I know it sounds harsh, but I say to people that there's a difference between a hobby and a business.
Yes.
And if you just want to do something because you like it and you don't want to commercialize it, that's fine. Make it into a hobby.
Yes.
But if you want it to be a proper, legit business, then you got to do the work, or you got to find somebody who's going to be willing to do the work with you. Not for you, but with you. Yeah. And that's where the co-founder relationship comes in.
Great advice. Great advice. It's a hobby. Look, we have a tradition here on this podcast to close out with top tips for our listeners to empower themselves. What are your top tips?
Self-care. So I think self-care is number one. There is a tendency to have this as a startup, I work, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and it's kind of like a trophy and like a badge of honor. No. Like, don't fall into any of those traps. Like, I'm the sort of person where despite everything that I do, I still have my 9 hours of sleep every night, right? It's like I don't sacrifice that. I don't sacrifice time with my family. So, if I have to be working, I want my family to be with me. And now my husband has banned me from doing work on the weekends, but that's really good. And I'm like,
that's excellent. You need people like that in your life.
But you feel like, I could do so much. You could always do a lot. There's always things that you have to do. So take a break, have time for yourself, have time for your family, because these are the people that are going to be supporting you. And if you don't put time aside for yourself and your family and your friends and et cetera, and you just work all the time, there's just not a good work-life balance. You're going to burn out. You're going to burn out really quickly. And then when you burn out, you don't have the energy and the space and the emotional, everything that goes into raising. When people say it's hard, it is really, really, really hard. Like, it takes everything out of you, like emotionally, physically, mentally. And if
you have to be on your game.
You have to be. And if you're not ready for that, if you don't have the support, like the number of times my husband has had to look after my 3 girls by himself and do everything by himself, and I wouldn't be able to pitch and travel to all these places if I didn't trust that he was going to be okay with that. Or, and so it's really important to have self-care, have these habits in place. I've actually started like having a exercise regime and diet, and being able to understand that if I'm healthy, if I'm at my best self, I can provide the best for the business. If I'm not happy, if mentally I'm not good, if I'm not in a right state of mind, the business is going to suffer. So there's no point trying to wear that badge of honor saying that I work 80 hours a week and I eat ramen noodles every day. I mean, if you want to eat it because you like it, fine. But like me,
it's not going to add to your health.
No, so
as delicious as that sounds.
Self-care is really important, and just be okay with what you have. Like, I think the comparison game is really easy to do, especially when you go on LinkedIn. It's almost like, this person is making it and doing so well. Why am I not like that? Keep in your own lane. See what you're doing. Don't look at what other people are doing, because you never know the whole story behind closed doors, what's affecting people. So focus on what you're doing and do it well. Be a good person, be a kind person, and things will fall into place.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a great place to end, Clarissa. Thank you for coming in.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening today. Do keep in mind that this is a podcast for informational purposes, and all we're really doing is sharing our opinions on things that matter to us. With that being said, if you liked what you heard and want to continue supporting us, share this podcast with your network to help us grow and bring on even more guests. Until next time, this is Iyari from EmpowerTech, signing off.